I would suggest anybody thinking about succession, everything should be in writing. Everything should be in black and white. It's so important because at the end of the day, if you're hung up on you said this, you said that, a handshake, even amongst family members, just doesn't work.
Welcome to The Boost, a podcast for home service contractors. We explore leaders and innovators in home services, their personal journeys, thoughts, and experiences with growth, marketing, and succession. We cover the good, the bad, the ugly, and its ultimate impact. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. Welcome to another episode of The Boost. I'm Zach Wilson, Chief Marketing Officer of Local. Today, we have Mike Prencavage, owner. I actually said that wrong. Prencavage.
Tomato, tomato. I go by, most people know me by Mike Jr. I am a junior, so I go by Mike Jr.
That makes it easier. Mike Jr., as we'll go for short, is owner of the Family Plumber. So thanks, Mike, for being here. And we'll dive quickly into your family history here. And where is Prencavage from?
Yeah. So we're actually a Polish family. Most of my family lives in Philadelphia. I'm born and raised here in Southern California, and that's where our company's based in Orange County, California.
Gotcha. And that's Philadelphia, right outside of Warsaw, right?
There's a bridge actually that connects it.
Quick train ride. When did they all come over?
Oh man, probably my third great grandparents when they came over. So
oh wow, you've been here for a while.
Yeah, I've been here for a while. Yeah, the name was actually changed once before. So it was actually, ironically, it was longer than what it is now. It's 10 letters. So it used to be 12. I'm happy. We're moving in the right direction.
Wait, so your original off the boat name is not?
It's not Prencavage. No, it was actually, there was an A added between the spelling and there was an asterisk. And so technically it's 2 additional letters.
Okay. That's funny that you say that because I live in Southern Ohio and we lived in Chicago for almost 20 years and just recently moved here. And Chicago's a huge, huge Polish community. And you can pretty quickly and easily distinguish who's Polish, Ukrainian, and even Russian. Those are the big densities. And you can pretty quickly and easily distinguish them. A lot of physical structure or physical attributes, number one, but then of course the last name. And I've gotten pretty good at it. And it's funny that you said that because I was like, when you said Polish, I was like, seems like there's a lot of vowels for a Polish name. And then you're like, we added an A to make it a little bit easier to whatever. And it's like, yeah, that makes perfect sense to me now.
Yeah, the evolution of our family heritage. It's complicated.
I have a lot of stories about that. The quick one was my stepmother through assimilation. How old is she now? She's in her like mid 70s. And 10 years ago, she just found out, through all this online gene stuff, they found out where they were like 70% Jewish. Her parents had passed fairly recently and went back and was like, what the heck? How did this come about? How did we never know this? And they're like, oh yeah, in the late 60s, we were just assimilating or whatever and kind of like changed our last name similar to what you said and kind of just shed our sort of Jewish heritage because it was easier and what was going on and da-da-da. Fortunately, it's very common. Anyway, so less about me and more about you. So tell us a little bit about the Family Plumber background when you got into it.
Yeah, no, I've been involved in the plumbing trade coming up on 14 years now this year. I've been plumbing since high school. My father started our company, the Family Plumber. We were incorporated and established 38 years ago. So we've been in business for quite a while. I've personally been in the plumbing trades for, like I said, 14 years. I took a little break for a little while. After I had left college, I had moved to Boston. And when I lived out in Boston for about 3 years, I moved into the automotive industry. So I worked in the auto industry for a little while. It wasn't fitting my mold. I felt like it was extremely dishonest. I'm a very open person. I wear my heart on my sleeve. It truly actually opened my eyes to say that plumbing trades is what I wanted to continue as my career path. I don't say that the 3 years I moved out to Boston was by any means a waste of time. But when I did move back from Boston, my father at the time was looking to retire. At the time, we had tried to do an acquisition or a succession plan, and it didn't quite work out to both of our expectations. So it took another couple of years. Then we were able to work it out. There was a lot of ups and downs. We were able to do a succession plan, and it's been close to 10 years now that I've been owner of the Family Plumber, and we've been growing steadily ever since. My father was always kind of, he's had an old school mindset. He's been great as far as building the company. He grew it to 2 trucks at the time when we started the succession plan. But I think it really took an extra amount of drive on the business side of things, letting go of the wrenches to grow the company to the next level. And currently we sit at 22 trucks in our fleet. So I'm excited about that.
That's a big jump. And was there a inflection point over the last 10 years or was it just pretty linear? And
yeah, it's been kind of more of a steady growth. I'm definitely more conservative when it comes to growth. I like to make sure that we are hitting our goal objectives, not just 1 year, but consistently so that it's sustainable. And when it comes to cash reserves and cash flow, cash is king to me. So I don't like to do too much into cash flow in the company. I like to make sure that we're stable and ride out any unforeseen circumstances, whether it's a recession, whether it's just a slowdown. And I've been very conservative on growth, and certainly I don't like the plateau. We are increasing, we are growing. I think now that we've actually grown to the size that we're at, we've opened up more doors to scale much quicker, and we're pursuing those opportunities as we speak. So hopefully we have some good things to come in the next couple of years.
Gotcha. You talked about your entering the business and the succession planning. So you came in 10 years ago, presumably. And one day you're like, Dad, I want to come back, or he asked you to come back, or what was that conversation like?
Yeah, no, the conversation started with him wanting to retire. As most business owners, they reach that, whether it's age or whether it's, some kind of medical disability, God forbid. But I've heard stories of that as I talk to a lot of business owners, that you reach a point in which you've owned your business for so many years and it's time to either get out or pursue something else. And when you don't have something lined up, which he didn't, the thought of retiring was just a pipe dream. I mean, no pun intended, it was a pipe dream. So the opportunity arose when he asked me whether or not I would be interested in coming back to the company and possibly taking over and running it full time at some point. And we both agreed on some terms, which just that process alone took 2 years to complete. That's one thing that I always say whenever I'm talking to somebody about a succession plan, is that when others say it takes 30 days, you'll write out a contract. It doesn't work that way, especially with family. I know business and family should be separate, but sometimes there's a lot of animosity that happens during that process. And so it does get drawn out a lot longer than most people think. But at the end of it, we were both happy with the terms and we were both happy with the direction of the company. So it's very rewarding once it's finally all said and done.
So through that process, he calls you up and wants to retire, and clearly he had visions of succession, right? He didn't look outside, or maybe he did and couldn't get what he wanted or whatever, but were you the sole option at that point in time?
Not necessarily, actually. And it's funny you asked that because he did have other options on the table. Once again, this was 10 years ago. At the time, PE groups weren't as prevalent as they are now. These private equity funds that are coming in and buying companies valued at $1 million or more. At that time, they weren't knocking on his door as much as they were maybe a few years later. However, he found that the opportunity to have his son come in and take over the company and help grow it at the same time, he was still a prevalent figure in the company. He knew he could work another 2 to 3 years. He just didn't want to deal with the business. So me coming in and initiating a succession plan, it took the weight of the business, the day-to-day operations, the creating processes, the keeping up with the financials, all that off his shoulder. He even tells me, all the time, like he tells anybody that asks him, is like, he's a plumber at heart. 90% of most plumbing business owners are plumbers at heart. They're not necessarily business owners. So I came back into it after getting some formal business training in college. I came back into it with a business mindset, and that's how we kind of scale up. But it's been a huge weight off his shoulder. He was able to actually stay working with us for a couple of years afterwards before he completely retired. But in that transition phase, he's thinking, I want to retire. What does that mean? And how do you do that? So it's very complicated, I will say, for a business owner that's just a plumber, not to try to figure out who that key man is, or that person that's going to fill that void.
Right. That's super important. And that's interesting because in these conversations from my side of it, there are all sorts of events that trigger these things, and they all seem different, but some of them are very well thought out. Some of them are more, I guess, organic, like this, which is just, one day I don't want to be doing this anymore. I don't want to be doing with employee personnel problems and books and stuff like that. And you need to change to sort of trigger that event. over that couple of years, what were the hangups that drew that process out? I guess stepping back, were you guys just trying to get to a point of going from you as a not an owner to 100%? Was that the plan? He wanted to go 0 to 100 or 100 to 0, and you wanted to go 0 to 100 in terms of equity or ownership?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always been a very motivated individual. If I see something, that genuinely I can see growing or scaling, this company was that. I would have come back if I saw no potential. We had a great client base. We still have a great client base that we're very community driven. And that is all based off the history that my father, full credit to him, had established with the company. So I saw that as an opportunity, and I simply said, my father has recognized business stressful for him. He doesn't like the operation side of things. I understand it. I'm very humble to the fact that I don't have all the answers. Let's see where this goes. And I just saw so much potential in it. So during those 2 years, some of the hangups really on the back end were, what is the company valuing at right now? That's obviously the biggest question that everybody asks during a succession plan. As a son, I'm paying towards an ultimate number, whatever that number is, whatever the evaluation of the company is. That number was really something we hung up on because it was a smaller company back then. The revenue was not as high as what most plumbing companies expect today as far as revenue. And that just came with, once again, my father was a great plumber, a master plumber. He's been doing it for many, many years. And it's just the business side of things wouldn't jive as well. So we looked at the evaluation more so on what we consider blue sky value at the time, which was, how valuable is the family plumber? It's very valuable, especially here in our area. And then what is our client base? How many clients do we have in our database? Things like that. And when we jumbled it all together, first initial conversation me and my father had about price, it was almost like one of those proverbial, arguments where you're like, everybody's saying their number at one time, ready, 3, 2, 1, and then we yelled it out.
Yeah,
it's got the history, right?
Yeah.
He wants to get the most value, but
right. Can imagine both sides, right? You're a little more business savvy. He's in the trenches guy, and both have their economic value, right? And unfortunately, sweat and heart don't have as much value as, dollars and cents, but they have a lot of emotional value. So I can very much understand.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have been a fly in the room on that one.
Well, there was the first initial discussion. And then, subsequently what we end up doing is we say, how are you coming up with that number? And then we start with that. And then we start to break it down even farther. Well, what ifs, a lot of the what ifs that happen with a transaction like that. What if, I agree at that time, he was agreeing to work with us for an additional set amount of years because he could still plumb. But what if I get hurt? What if I can't contribute to the company? Am I screwed out of the total value of the purchase if I can't contribute back to the company? So there's so many different ways you can slice the pizza pie that way. And I think that that's really what took the most amount of time. Not to mention, when you start to break down a company and liabilities of a company, we were a very simple transaction. We've since attempted to acquire a few other companies, so I know the process of acquiring companies now. But I'll say that our process of the succession was very simple, but we had so many liabilities when it comes to, what if I get hurt or, God forbid, I pass away as the new owner. And so you have to cover yourself with life insurance policies and key man policies to keep your existing employees engaged. A lot of that all went into that 2-year process. And then there was just, there was some animosity there at some points. That argument in and of itself, you want this number, I want this number. It's like, okay, let's take a couple weeks. Let's think about this and then we'll come back to the drawing board. Well, a couple weeks ends up taking 30 days, month and a half, whatever. So it is a drawn out process. And I would suggest anybody thinking about succession, everything should be in writing. Everything should be in black and white. It's so important because at the end of the day, if you're hung up on you said this, you said that, a handshake, even amongst family members, just doesn't work.
I would agree with that. When you're talking about the number and breaking it down, what was the first conversation when you broke it down? Let's just start with your side of it, the business side of it. What was baked into your price overall from your valuation?
Yeah. So my evaluation was more based off assets. I looked at solely off revenue generated, gross revenue generated to the amount of debt. At the time, my father's always been extremely conservative, paying off his trucks as quickly as possible. and, things like that. So there wasn't a lot of debt, but the assets themselves, I could say that the truck evaluation at this point in time with this mileage is worth this. So I was very systematic on the asset.
And just for a reminder, we're talking about 2 trucks, right?
2 trucks. Yeah, 2 trucks.
This is the part that I'm going to keep revisiting because as an outsider, and it's easy, right? It's easy to we're talking about 2 trucks, not 22.
That's when I go back to, this was a very simple transaction.
Right.
Once again, you have to respect, and I've always respected my father's contribution to this company because he did the blood, sweat, and tears. I remember, as I was growing up, I lived it. I was a son, right? So I would see my dad leave 5:30 in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, and not get home till about that same time. And I can see the amount of sweat equity that he's putting to the company. Then again, looking at it from obviously a business standpoint is how do you turn that into a number? And I think when there's emotions involved, which is exactly the way that he was perceiving the transaction, which is I spent the 28 years developing that. He wants to get that payment back on the 28 year. And I'm telling him a snapshot of what the company looks like today. Had he grown it to a much higher level, like what you're saying, then we'd be talking a totally different scale, different numbers. I think that's where there was a huge difference was, what is the value that I brought to the company as the founder and the creator of this company? What have I been able to accomplish and bring to the company over 28 years? And my perception is, okay, here's what you've actually grown it to as far as an asset. And then we need to determine this middle ground. What type of value does your company provide to the community right now? And what kind of resources can we tap into? Whether it's we just do a slight increase on pricing and all of a sudden the value of the company goes up. And so it was tough to say the least.
In that process, did you I don't know how sophisticated your dad was at the time, but I mean, it sounds like he did have some sort of customer database or CRM or whatever. Did you go through that? Did you look at that? Did you I've got active, inactive and put any dollar or appraised value on those?
We did. Yeah. And so I'm more fact driven. I went through, I evaluated what our client database looked like at the time. And we also did do active and inactive as far as determining what type of revenue we would expect if we kept everything the same. So we can make projections all day long, like, oh, you could grow the company into 20 trucks and yada, yada, yada. I think that was kind of the discussion that I was getting from him was, you could do this, you could do that. I could, but it hasn't happened yet. So why am I going to pay something that one, I have to work towards to build to that level that you explained and not have a guarantee whatsoever? Doesn't make business sense. But we did in a very simplistic format. I went through and evaluated that. As far as what I considered at the time, blue sky value of those active clients, I would simply take their average ticket cost revenue and I would multiply it by the customer database that was considered active over a 12-month period. And I determined that as that equation, that very basic equation that, hey, this is the potential revenue that we would see if all things stayed the same moving into the next following.
For sure. What was total contacts, inactive, active? We're talking like 500,000, 5,000.
Oh, no. Yeah, we're down to, at the time we had about 4,800 or 5,000, maybe just short of 5,000. So let's round up to about 5,000.
Oh, okay.
Currently on a database of a little over 30. So we're at 32,000.
I was just trying to do the math on per truck from an efficiency standpoint that you're packing a lot more into each sort of truck now too, which is kind of interesting. So let's talk about the difference between you've come to the table with debt, trucks, maybe office. Did you guys own or rent at the time?
Rent. We still rent.
Still rent. Okay. So nothing there. What other liabilities were there at the time then?
So at the time we had some equipment. We had a liner, we had a jetter at the time. We had some assets like that I was evaluating in that overall price. But I was even nice enough to, when I was doing the evaluation, to determine what the revenue generation of that particular equipment would produce over a 12-month period so that I could say, you know what, I'm not going to depreciate this as an asset. So like the jettering equipment was $60,000. I wasn't going to depreciate it to 40 and say, okay, well, this is what it truly honestly costs. I was taking a 12-month period and saying, how many jobs are we going to be able to retain on this and be realistic to the valuation at that point? If we were able to do, a set amount that I felt comfortable with, I would say the evaluation on that equipment's maybe 80,000 as opposed to 60,000. So it was very kind of give and take on not depreciation, but the true value of that asset. Is how we determined a lot of the equipment side of things.
Gotcha. What were the big differences in this? Which again, obviously is the emotional aspect and his heart and sweat and things like that, which can't be quantified, unfortunately. What else did he bring to the table that's like, this, we've got to put a dollar on this. This is what I'm seeing is valuable, and you just didn't agree or didn't see it?
Well, the value per client. So, the value of each individual in the database was definitely a huge argument that we always had. And it's, once again, potential revenue. There's process that needs to change, whether it's a price book increase. He was making assumptions that if you increase your price book from what I sent currently right now, you'll end up making a higher revenue, which is true, but those are future. Once again, we're not evaluating off the potential, evaluating it off what the existing current evaluation of the company looks like. If I wasn't the owner, what is the evaluation of the company look like? So that was the biggest hang up, I think, was probably evaluating what that book value looked like.
Did you ever just turn and say, Dad, shoulda, coulda, woulda, right? You could have done this two years earlier and you'd have twice as much money,
Pretty much every time we were disagreeing on price, that was the argument, and I have to put it nicely, obviously, everything you've done with this company for the past 28 years. But, if you had done this, maybe we'd be looking at this, and to your point, absolutely. I will say there was even portions of that succession time period, that 2-year time period, where there was almost an all-out brawl out in the parking lot. So it gets pretty intense sometimes, especially between family members. When you talk about a succession between a non-family member, maybe an owner to an employee that has worked with that owner for many years, there's a different dynamic there. When it comes to family, it breaks all of the rules in half because you have that personal relationship with that individual. You're my son, so you have to respect what I say. You're my father, so I have to respect what you say. It's this kind of back and forth dynamic, and it explodes sometimes.
Yeah.
And it did a couple times. So.
Yeah, no surprise there. But then on the flip side of it, there's a lot of examples where it can go the other way, right? Like, your family, you're this, you're that, and here's keys to the kingdom and go on, right? It just depends. So 2 years in, and what did the final deal in terms sort of look like? Again, he was trying to go from 100% equity to zero, sell the whole company, as opposed to a lot of transition and succession plans are, whether it's family or not, it's slowly buy back, buy your equity over this amount of time to mitigate risk, to mitigate cost in dollars and cents. So, what went into that?
Yeah. So I'll kind of talk in terms of the normal acquisition, which is you talk about EBITDA and getting true evaluation of your company based off all of the factors that we just discussed, right? And bringing it all into one package. PE groups now are looking at, a few years back, we're looking at 10 times your EBITDA value. If you were to correlate that in EBITDA value to me and my father's discussion about the acquisition price, I think he was looking more so for 100 times EBITDA, and so
I can't say I'm surprised. Based on this conversation, I don't even know your dad, and I'm not surprised at all.
So I'll put it in terms of EBITDA percentage. So he was looking for 100 times EBITDA, and I was looking for maybe 5 to 8 times EBITDA, and we had to somehow take that huge gap and bring it as much as we can. Now, I will say I didn't pay more than 10 times EBITDA on the company because that's just outlandish, and we finally came to terms on that. But we worked out a better opportunity for him to continue working with the company for a few years after that, so that he could retain a paycheck, and it was a win-win for the company. So we were able to negotiate all that in between. But yeah, that was kind of the huge difference there.
And when you went into this, did you know, were you aware, I hate to use the word savvy, but savvy enough at this point in time to know or aware of what market was at this point in time? Again, a business with, 2 trucks versus 10 or 5, those are, as they're completely different businesses, from operational staffing, SOPs, back office, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's just night and day. So were you aware of the actual market value of things at this size at that point in time? Again, what year is it? So this is 2014. Is that about right?
Yeah, I would say I was aware of going back to the total value of the company. I think what I wasn't aware of was the existing market value, potential buyers of the company.
That's what I'm saying. Right.
Yeah. I had absolutely no clue what companies were paying other companies for at that time. You are correct on that, but I certainly knew based off the basic numbers that we were trying to work out.
Right.
And 100 times
what's too much.
Was a little bit excessive.
Knowing what you know now, but do you know what market was at that point in time in 2014? What were people paying?
Yeah. So back in 2014, they were paying in excess of about 16 times multiples.
Okay. Gotcha.
So it wasn't until the peak, like really during COVID.
2019, 2020. Yeah.
COVID was insane. It was 10, even 12 times multiples here in Southern California, depending on your market shares.
Knowing what you know now and going back, it sounds like based on what you're saying, you got not a deal, but you were pretty on point in terms of where you guys netted out. Is that safe to say?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, of course, the business side of me says, oh, no, I didn't make anything off that deal. But I think it was a fair deal overall. And I think was good in certain sides of the deal. The potential for revenue increase was there. And I knew that was there. I knew that there was going to be a risk once I took over that company may not produce the numbers that I think it's going to produce. But I was almost 100% sure that we could do what we were able to do. And it was nerve wracking, but it all worked out. I was very comfortable with the deal. Let's put it that way. And I believe my father, even to this day, I think he's extremely comfortable with it. He's since retired and, he's out serving ministries across the United States, actually still plumbing, ironically enough, but he's serving charities like Samaritan's Purse and going out to disaster areas and setting up water filtration systems. And he's doing what he loves.
That's awesome. Moving forward to the final terms of the deal, and not necessarily dollars and cents, but what was the agreement in terms of the payout? Did you do, obviously something you brought up was he retained a job for 2 years, paid commensurate salary, I would guess, with a master plumber. And that was part of it. What else was it? Was it cash? Was it cash over 5 years? I've literally heard things where, just as an example, where the seller literally just wants X amount of check, but they want it for 15 years. But, instead of getting it all up front, they want that same check for like 15 years just so they can have, the sense of recurring income. So it's wild how people sort of process what they need and what they want.
What we did was an initial deposit, if you will, towards the contract. Mm-hmm. So that was the ante or the buy. From there, we produced a limited 5-year payment program or a sweat equity program, 3 of which his salary actually contributed towards the company, that we could pay it off a lot sooner as long as we met our revenue goals. So we took a 5-year contract and basically brought it down to 3. Over the years, we were able to pay off that sweat equity, but it was a initial deposit with a sweat equity. And in retrospect, the initial deposit was about 25% of the total purchase.
Gotcha. And what was the final length? It was 3 years?
3 years. Yeah, we brought it down to 3 years because the company was doing so well. So we were able to.
Oh, that's why. Gotcha. Was there any interest on any of that over the period, or was it no?
No. That's one of the beauties too. I mean, if you're designing a succession plan, you should try to keep it as simple as possible when you're writing out the details on payment. When you add in interest, typically that's a sign of, mistrust in paying that debt back. We knew that this was already a well-established company.
Yeah.
And we weren't going to go backwards. Let's put it that way.
Right.
We were just sustaining our current revenue generation. We're already making our payments.
But, just on the sort of contrarian side of that, I don't disagree for what it's worth. However, there is a time value of money. And if these terms are, as they stretch out, especially right now with like such inflation on the rise and the dollar diminishing, it's like you've almost have to put that, if you're stretching it over 5 years, they're like, who the heck knows? And you're doing, distributions, whether it's quarterly, biannually, or annually, or even monthly. There's a time value of money. And if you're, again, applying business acumen, $1 today is going to be worth 80 cents in 5 years, right? It's a 3% inflation. So the theme with all these things, I think, is every deal's different. They're all about give and take, right? I mean, there's none that are just that simple. Some people may get that and some people may not. You've mentioned we a few times, but I'm not sure. Were there other parties involved? Brokers, lawyers?
So we did have 2 lawyers involved, and we had
You each had your own, I assume?
Each had our own, to review the terms of the contract to make sure everything was good. And then we hired a secondary attorney to come in and actually write the contract. Well, the initial contract was written by one attorney, and then we each had our own, respectively looked everything over. That's pretty typical that you would see that. Or if you're hiring one attorney for both parties, you just have to make sure that there's no bias, no intermixing of, hey, that's my family attorney. I've known him for 20 years. Obviously, he's going to work on my side type thing. We didn't have any of that. It was just a matter of circumstances that we were able to kind of bring 3 together. But it gets a little hairy.
And of course, 2 years of legal fees was not nothing.
Yeah. Lawyers and attorneys are charging $250 an hour for anything. Yeah. Right. Can we hurry up this little transaction here?
Yeah. Dad, we spent more money on attorney fees than the actual deal itself. So let's move this along.
Yeah. I would say, actually, going back to your point about terms and conditions and interest on those payments, one thing that we did set in stone is an early payoff, not penalty, but I guess it would be a penalty, but an early payoff penalty on the contract. Reason being is because he wasn't yet at retirement, where he's collecting Social Security. So he understood that, and knowing that there was still that time period that he needed to meet before it kind of balanced itself out, we decided that there would be an early termination.
Oh, interesting. What was that based on? Was it a fixed number or was it a percentage?
Yeah, it was a fixed number. It was a fixed number that he needed, and it was year by year. So if we ended the contract in 4 years, it would be a fixed dollar amount, and then so on and so forth. And that was all based off his retirement planning. So, which I agree.
Again, let's pretend this person isn't your dad, and you have clearly a good business acumen. Why did you pay it off early then?
We were hosting board meeting style meetings, and I think that in order for us to grow, there had to be a little bit more control. I think it did come down to a lot of the overall decision-making process, the control process. I appreciate his input. We're trying to move over from a handwritten invoice system to service type. And, it was extremely difficult to try to get him on board with that. Obviously, you're kind of an old school mindset where paper is king, and, nothing's going to trump that. And, they talk about cloud-based storage. That's so unsafe. Our clients' information is out there for people to steal. So we had those types of arguments. So in order to grow the company, I felt like it was worthwhile.
I guess that's another interesting point too, is that, as this transition's happening, and I guess I didn't understand this, because despite the deal being done or all of the equity and interest being transferred in one full swoop, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, that's what I understood, right? At the day of signing, that was what happened. However, based on what you just said, he still kept a sort of like C-level position or advisory position in, I guess, the boardroom or in these board meetings, despite him having no ownership. It was Mike Sr. and he built the company type of thing. Like you just couldn't get him out type of thing. What was that?
Yeah, it's more like I go back to that family dynamic, right? So it's that father-son dynamic. In separating business from family is extremely difficult. So when those conversations or those viewpoints would pop up, he would see me make a position or look to move or change something within the company. He'd come in and try to talk to me like, as if we were just talking about business, and then use the example of, me as your father who started this company years ago, I believe that this is and it just kind of toys with your creative push to try to change things, and it kind of hinders it a little bit. So I was getting a lot of that, initially. I just felt like it was hindering blow.
It sounds like it was a smart move.
I will say I absolutely respect my father. Still to this day, I appreciate every opinion. presents my way,
including paper invoices.
I'm happy to listen to you all day long. But yeah, I know I'll make my my viewpoints known on that. But it's honestly, yeah, we've had great discussions now. Obviously, he's retired, so we had discussions about business, and it's much more casual. I think the company now is at a scale that he oftentimes, when I'm talking about it, he doesn't understand, certain these processes that we're talking about, the SOPs, like, understanding EBITDA, understanding total, vehicle purchases, the old school mindset of purchasing every vehicle. Now we're leasing vehicles through enterprise fleet management. Just getting on board with that. I don't think he understands what the value of a lease vehicle is as opposed to owning the vehicle, how you end up risking more by owning the car. So things like that we have to, kind of work through and it's teetered off. If we had talked about things like that at the beginning, it would have been way over his head. And honestly, I've been learning a lot myself. I didn't know everything way back then, and I just take it as it comes. It's been an interesting ride, but it's been a ride for sure.
Yeah.
That roller coaster.
That's great. Sidebar, when did you guys switch to leased? At what point?
That was actually more recently. We were growing quite a bit over the past 2 years, 3 years, actually, since COVID. I mean, we grew during COVID 34%. Every plumbing company did. But I think last year we finally determined that it was not sustainable for us to purchase vehicles. And obviously me being the guarantor on the loans and things like that, we needed a better option. And we were fortunate enough to be introduced to Enterprise Fleet Services. And they came in and said, okay, well, you qualify based off the amount of vehicles you currently have to get leased vehicles at a extremely factory direct, basically. And so that really now has opened up our horizons quite a bit. We can scale better. We have our process in place, our organizational charts in place for positions, duties, things like that. And so now it's just a matter of putting the work. How do we get the revenue stream going? How do we get on marketing working properly? Which is obviously, it's a very important aspect of business is marketing. I'm excited to see the growth. But we started that about a year ago.
Totally digressing here, but do you convert the existing fleet into leases, or do you still own and operate everything and then just transition them as need be?
We own 90% of the vehicles before we started this program. So we were only on debt, on paper anyway, for roughly there in about 10% of the total vehicle assets. So it was actually a very low percentage. Usually you see most companies, their debt to income ratio is completely skewed and you have so much debt on your platter. We were actually pretty low on debt. So it was actually perfect timing. We have most of our vehicles are paid on. So when we moved into this, we're not planning on using the lease vehicles to push the other vehicles that we own out of circulation. We're just building our fleets.
Gotcha. It's new trucks. And then anything that becomes out of service or whatever, you replace with a vehicle or a lease vehicle.
We have a couple of spares now. So vehicles obviously go down for maintenance, bunch of different reasons. And so we have the ability to swap guys in and out of vehicles.
So looking back at your turbulent 2-year period, no, maybe not that turbulent, but what would you go back and to yourself, Mike Jr., and say, Mike Jr., you know what? I want you to get this done in, let's be reasonable, 2 months as opposed to 24 months. What would you say to Mike Jr. in 2013, 2012, whatever, whenever it started, and be like, yeah, let's get this done in 3 months. Here's what you got to do. Yeah. Is that even possible? Was that even possible? I mean, maybe not.
It was possible. And I say that the biggest thing that I regret not doing was putting timetables on the next meeting. So setting action items was one of those things that I was unfortunately not that good at. And so I would say that 2-year time process should have been more than half of that. It should have been cut off that process. But it came down to, we would have a discussion. We would be so far away from each other. And we would say, well, we need to come back to the drawing board with a different discussion. But we'd never set that action item date properly. And I would say a week, maybe max 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We weren't setting those dates. So obviously we're still running the day-to-day operations of the company. So we get so enthralled with, having to keep the day-to-day stuff going that sometimes the succession plan was just put on the back burner because it was just way too much. At the time I was on call as a technician as well. So I'm out in the field working, he's out in the field working. So we should have set better action items.
You're here, you're in the wild, talking to other parties that are most likely going to participate in some succession planning on the buying side. What advice would you give to them to specifically move through this more swiftly or easily with their family or father or whoever it is?
Yeah, I would suggest, beyond the recommendation of going black and white on everything, write everything down, document everything, discussions that you've had, create action items and document everything. Beyond all that, I would say getting a third party evaluator. We made a misstep on that. That's also something I would go back and redo. We did it because the cost savings, we knew that it was going to be expensive to have a third party come in. At the time, I think we were quoted like $20,000, to have a third party come and evaluate the company, give us an assessment, a true and honest assessment of what the value of the company is. But hindsight's always 2020. I think it's extremely valuable to do that. Because it keeps it honest to both parties. And that third party evaluator is going to bring up some good points that this individual has in the transaction and bring up some good points that this person. But they're going to be factual, which I love. They're going to be factual based. They're going to be business based, and you're not going to get this whole interpretation aspect of the acquisition. So I do strongly recommend getting a third party evaluator.
I would agree with that. Given the company size, we can probably all imagine the company size that's a lot of money, right? And so, I can easily see how you skip over that or want to step over that because you're like, I don't want to spend all this money on it. But that would have probably chopped off a year and a half in itself, right?
You think of it as like a truck at $20,000, and that was just the start. Basically, we all know as lawyers and stuff, the initial quote is typically double by the end of that entire process. So that was just the start.
Yeah.
So if we get an evaluation 20,000, we're like, whoa, we could collectively, even if both of us didn't even own this business, we could buy another truck for $20,000,
right.
And make more money. So we're thinking this is lost money, like just going down the drain.
Yeah.
But in reality, though, it's so important to know the true evaluation of the company.
Yeah, I guess just in hindsight, knowing what you know now, and you've gone through a couple of deals, do you think you got it right?
I believe so. I think I got majority 90% of it right. I think on the more specifically on the blue sky value of the customers, I got it wrong because I was kind of led into this argument of, no, these clients are worth way more than what you're evaluating. So I caved, and I said, okay, well, we're going to increase that and say that each of our customers, our active customers, are worth more in blue sky value, this perceived value. And I think I gave way too much in that category. But I think on the business side of things, the actual assets, I gave a true evaluation.
Yeah, it sounds like it. The customers are, no matter what you're looking at or evaluating and putting a valuation on, it's a sliding scale. But the business, the price book, the market, what programs, recurring revenue programs are in place, call it what it is, less sophisticated, the smaller you are. There's pretty strong correlation between sophistication and size, generally speaking. Big companies can not be sophisticated, but that's not very often the case. But the smaller ones, it's like the less sophisticated they are, the less these things are in place, the documentation, and just the harder it is to get a number down. And you really, at the end of the day, kind of have to go a little bit off your gut. What is this worth? What, like you said, what's the brand value in our market? Things like that. Even for the biggest companies, brand equity and market share are things that are very, very challenging to put hard prices on anyway. So yeah, so cool. Well, anything else that we missed in your 10-year journey of owner of the Family Plumber?
No, I just appreciate you asking me to come on, and I think it's great, what you're doing and interviewing, industry experts and or leaders in the industry. I think we're obviously, as youthful entrepreneurs out in the world right now, I've met quite a few through my tenure with PHEC, being the president of that organization here in Orange County and beyond. See and meet a lot of younger business owners that are ready to hustle and ready to grow their companies. They need to hear from other youthful guys like myself. As we always say in the industry, you know, there's plenty of fish out there. We're not a small pond. We're in a huge pond. So we can all fish together. So hopefully it's informative to anybody that listens to this, and vice versa. I love seeing content. I love learning new things. So I'm excited to see some of the other episodes you have going.
Yeah. Well, thanks. And thanks for coming on. And I agree. I think a lot of people in general that get into these situations get tied up with how to go through them because there's no playbook, especially on the smaller side. You know, again, at the bigger you get, let's just say, and it doesn't get easier. There's a lot more resources out there because you have experts obviously willing to step in, help you, you know, get paid for their help, take hefty bounties for their work, etc. But the smaller and the less sophisticated, it's kind of, you know, like which way's the wind blowing type of thing. So I do think hearing a lot of these stories, and hey, I have yet to hear anybody say that it took 2 years for a deal this size to go through. And, you know, other people, you know, don't sweat it. It will happen if you want it to happen. And hopefully we can all learn something from one another about the process. So just really quickly, you can find Mike and the company Family Plumber, thefamilyplumber.com. And what's your preferred social?
I'm all over the place. So yeah, and obviously thefamilyplumber.com is our company. We have the Family Plumber as a handle on social media. I do a lot on social media through my page, SoCal Plum Guy. So SoCal Plum Guy. If you want to follow me, absolutely feel free to do so. I'm typically interviewing most influencers throughout the United States, as well as business owners. I'm truly passionate about the trade industry. That's why I'm so heavily involved in the Plumbing, Heating, Cooling Contractors Association, which that association is over 140 years. I've served at the local level on the board, as well as become president, 3-year term, extended president here in Orange County, and served on the state board, now serving with national. So heavily involved in the trade industry. Go follow me on that. You can see any updates that I have. I typically do an IG Live, actually every Thursday night with my friend John Mesenbrink with Mechanical Hub Media. So if you're interested in seeing some of the guests we have on, similar to this, we love talking about the industry. We love talking about the history of that individual. And we've had some pretty big names. We've had the president of Nexstar Network on a couple of weeks ago, and we've had the president of Milwaukee came on, Milwaukee Tool. So nice. we know quite a few people, and we're excited. Yeah, once again, it's all about learning together. So I think it's great.
What, just for clarification, I actually haven't even seen that. Is that all on your Thursday night live thing?
Yeah. So we're on episode, or at least live anyway. We're on live number 40.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've totally missed that. And that's Thursday night on Instagram or Facebook?
Thursday night, Instagram, 5 p.m. Pacific, so it'd be 8 p.m.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you go back through the history though on my page, you can see everybody that we've interviewed. You'll see John Mesenbrink, our Mechanical Hub, and you'll see kind of how we lay it out and everything. But it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it, and they're all friends of mine. So we've had Victor and Cor on. Me and Victor hang out quite a bit and go to dinner together.
Yeah, you guys are in the same hood.
Yeah, he's right down the street from me.
Where are you? What is he, Huntington?
He's in Huntington. I'm in Los Alamitos, which is right between Long Beach.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Gotcha. When you do the live things, do you capture them, you record them, and then break them out?
We do. Yeah, they're under all of our archived tag posts. So if you go into my page and you go into archived, or at least off to the right hand side, all my tag.
I think it's great. It's very interactive and it's fun. So I'll have to check out, I guess, tonight. Are you going live tonight?
So no, actually, I did post tonight. We are taking the night off. Fortunately, John is unavailable tonight.
Oh, gotcha.
We're taking a breather. We've gone out of the 49 episodes that we've done, we've only missed 2 nights. Yeah,
I mean, you're almost at your 1 year anniversary, right? If not at it, based on that math. Right. Yeah. So don't miss your anniversary. Right.
Yeah. It's been a while. We stay pretty consistent. You had a business meeting in South Carolina.
Honestly, the hardest part, and us connecting was a testament to it. It's from my side of it, it's a pain in the ass to get people pinned down. I have not done the math, but I spend way too much time each week trying to pin people down. And I don't know how many we're out now. We probably won't see this for a month or so.
But yeah, it's extremely hard to lock people down on the lives because we're not archiving anything. We're not saving it.
The direct ROI on this is not worth the time. Let's just say that.
Yeah, no, I get it. Trust me, I own a plumbing business. What is a live benefit of me? At the end, I meet new people. And I think for me, if I meet somebody that's willing to give me, or I ask them a question and it puts a thought in my mind or a process that maybe they're using that could benefit the company, I think it's worthwhile.
Thanks again for your time, and I will talk to you soon.